Imagine having absolute power. I mean, the ability to execute anyone with just a whisper. And yet you spend your nights writing these private notes to yourself on how to be a good man. Marcus Aurelius wasn't writing for us. He wasn't writing a philosophy textbook. He was, in a way, performing emergency surgery on his own soul every single night, trying to stop himself from becoming a tyrant.
It's arguably the greatest paradox in Roman history. It really is. He takes the throne in 161 AD, and the world just immediately throws everything it has at him. You've got plagues, you've got these relentless wars in the east with Parthia, barbarian invasions on the northern borders, and then on top of all that, political treachery. Avidius Cassius, one of his own top generals, proclaims himself emperor. I mean, his entire world is collapsing into chaos, and yet his main concern, the thing he writes about in his meditations, is his own sanity, his own integrity.
And that's exactly the mission for this deep dive. We're going to conduct a kind of psychological autopsy of Marcus Aurelius's mind. We're trying to dissect the mindset you'd need to stay sane, to stay virtuous, while sitting in the most powerful office on earth during a total state of emergency.
And here's the absolute key, the lens through which you have to view all of this. These writings were never, ever meant to be published.
Right. It's not propaganda.
Not at all. This is his raw, unguarded, private therapy session, often written, in a tent while he's on campaign at the Danube front lines. And what it shows is that the Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man on the planet, was grappling with the exact same insecurities, the same toxic people, the same dread that you might feel today.
Okay, so let's get into that chaos, the core conflict, really. It's this grinding, constant pressure from the outside world versus this desperate need for some kind of internal peace. He's managing a vast collapsing empire, military failures, disease, and not to mention a co-emperor, Lucius Verus, who, well, sources say was notoriously profligate. That kind of external noise must have been deafening.
Oh, absolutely. And that constant assault from the outside, it forced him to realize something fundamental, relying on the outside world for any kind of stability. That was a guaranteed path to madness. He needed a defense mechanism, a fortress that the Parthians couldn't breach, that the Senate couldn't undermine. He was seeking what modern psychology would call securing one's locus of control.
Ah, the famous Inner Citadel.
Yeah.
So he realized the only thing he actually owned, the one thing that couldn't be taken away by war or plague or politics, was his own judgment, his own mind.
Exactly. A locus of control, for anyone unfamiliar with the term, it just describes where you believe the power over your life resides. If it's external fate, luck, other people, then you're basically a victim. But if it's internal, then you are sovereign. Marcus basically drilled himself over and over to believe the mind is, and I'm quoting here, of itself sufficient unto itself. It can't be disturbed by external forces unless, and this is the catch, it willingly brings itself to need them. That's staggering to me. How do you even train yourself to believe that? When the news is terrifying or you're in physical pain or a subordinate betrays you, surely that stuff seizes your senses. It demands your attention, right?
He admitted that it does. It absolutely seizes the senses. But the psychological defense he built was, well, it was profound. He taught himself that the mind retains the power to preserve its serenity by supposing the external accident is no evil. It's a kind of ruthless denial, but only as a means to protect that inner rational core.
So the goal isn't to pretend the pain doesn't exist. It's to refuse to give it a moral weight, to not let it derail your thinking.
Precisely. So much of our modern stress and anxiety comes from giving power to things we can't control, to the opinions of others. Marcus writes so explicitly, no man can rob another of his free will. His constant internal mantra was basically designed to anchor him. He'd say, I will keep my divine part content if it can but exist and act in accordance with its nature. He's warning himself, the emperor, not to let his happiness depend on what other people think. It's like the ultimate preemptive boundary setting. He was, as one source put it, drilling his soul in right principles. Because if you wait until the crisis hits to start practicing virtue, it's just too late. The citadel has to be built in the calm so it can withstand the storm.
And to maintain that inner citadel, to keep reinforcing its walls against, vanity and catastrophe, Marcus relied very heavily on specific cognitive tools for survival. These weren't just vague philosophical ideas. They were mental exercises, almost like tricks, designed to rewire his immediate emotional reactions.
And the first one, maybe the most powerful, is what he called objective representation, which today we would label cognitive reframing. It's this idea of stripping away the glamour.
Yes. This tool is all about seeing things for what they really are, fundamentally, without all the emotional stories and cultural narratives we layer on top of them. It's an exercise where you deliberately look at something coveted or something you dread, and you just strip it down to its raw components. You're peeling back the illusion.
And the examples he uses in the meditations are just wonderfully, brutally blunt. He'd look at this famous, expensive wine, Falernum, and remind himself it's just fermented grapes. He'd look at some incredible feast and see only its parts. This is the carcass of a fish, this of a bird, and this of a hog. It sounds almost hostile.
It has to be hostile, because the temptation for an emperor, the pull of luxury and vanity, it's overwhelming. By viewing everything from riches and honor to things he dreaded like death and decay as equally vile and contemptible, he just neutralized their power over him. The object itself, he noted, doesn't reach the soul. The trouble only comes from the opinion that's within. The world is neutral. It's our judgment that makes it good or bad.
What a practical way to fight attachment. You're not trying to stop yourself from wanting the thing. You're just changing what the thing is.
Exactly. Now let's look at the flip side of that, which is basically a kind of psychological self-vaccination. Marcus practiced what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum, or negative visualization.
Okay, that sounds really counterintuitive. We're always told to think positively, right? And here he is, actively forcing himself to imagine loss and catastrophe. Why?
It's a radical strategy for managing attachment. It's an inoculation. If you cherish something, your health, the political win, your family, you prepare your mind for losing it. When you clearly visualize the worst-case scenario, you transform potential disappointment into simple preparedness. It robs bad news of its power to blindside you and send you into a panic.
He gives that incredibly powerful advice about his own children. He says, don't pray for the external outcome, like for your child to be safe from the plague. Instead, he says you should pray rather against the fear of losing him than against the loss itself.
The control shifts instantly. It becomes total. You stop wishing for some external miracle and you start training your internal emotional muscle. He applied that same cold, rational logic to pain and suffering itself. He basically broke suffering down into two categories. That which is intolerable is soon ended by death, and that which holds long must needs be tolerable. It just shatters the cycle of dread by forcing it to face cold, hard reason.
So this mental autopsy brings us to the actual scale of his crisis. I mean, he was dealing with continental-level chaos, information overload. He even confesses to having that Monday morning dread of getting out of bed to do his duties. He complains that common creatures like a sparrow or an ant, they just run to do that, which thy nature doth require, without complaint while he stalls.
Right, and to fight that existential dread, that information overload, he needed a tool to immediately shrink his problems down to their proper size. And this is where he used the ultimate zoom out, a technique we'd now call cognitive distancing, or taking the cosmic perspective.
That's right. He'd use the contemplation of just immense vastness, of space, of time, to dissolve his present anxieties. He'd remind himself that the whole earth is but as one point. The great oceans are but a drop, and Mount Athos but a grain, in the context of the entire universe.
It's such a radical way to destroy the ego. If your whole life is just a short and very momentary portion in an infinite series of ages, then how important is today's Senate meeting, really? How critical is that political fight? He'd look back at the busy lives of all these powerful emperors before him, Vespasian, Trajan, all their maneuvering, all their worries, and he noted they all ended the same way, reduced to elements, swallowed by oblivion. They are no sooner dead than forgotten.
That's an incredible antidote to our modern obsession with fame and impact, isn't it?
Yeah.
If an emperor of Rome is forgotten that quickly, why should we be so terrified of what a few people say about us online?
And he applied this perspective directly to the daily struggle of leadership, dealing with difficult, toxic, petty people. This section of the Meditations is maybe the most relatable part for anyone in a high-stress job today.
Absolutely. We all have that one toxic coworker, the difficult boss, the family member who just seems intent on creating drama. Marcus, the emperor, was surrounded by them.
So what strategies did this autopsy reveal for dealing with those impossible people?
His strategy is basically twofold. The first one requires incredible empathy and distance. When someone misbehaves, you have to assume they're acting out of ignorance and mistake. They're pursuing what they wrongly believe to be good. They are sick. He asks, "How canst thou but be gentle unto him that is in an error?" And that single move, it just removes anger and replaces it with pity, or at least a kind of clinical distance.
So if you're dealing with someone who's constantly undermining you at work, you stop seeing them as malicious, and you start seeing them as someone who just fundamentally misunderstands how to be happy, and so they're acting out of a kind of self-harming ignorance. Precisely. And the second strategy, it goes right back to the cosmic perspective. He realized that slander, criticism, all that gossip, it's just leaves blowing in the wind, just like all human concerns. The obsession with fame, with winning trivial arguments, is mere vanity. He actually found strength in a quote from Antisthenes that it is a royal thing to be ill-spoken of for good deeds. He didn't have to win the argument, he just needed to stay true to his own mind, which was the only thing he really controlled.
So if we look back at the results of this whole mental autopsy, what really stands out is just the profound vulnerability under all that imperial gold. This ruler, the most powerful human being on the planet, was constantly struggling with insecurity, with toxic colleagues, with the temptation to be vain, and with existential dread.
The real significance of meditations isn't that it's some perfect philosophical roadmap, it's that it's a private journal, a painful record of a struggle for functional human goodness. He was governing an empire spanning continents, but his biggest battle was internal, constantly reminding himself of this one fundamental truth. Happiness has very few wants.
He was the most privileged and the most burdened man in the world. And yet the psychological tools he forged, locus of control, cognitive reframing, negative visualization, they're available to anyone, regardless of wealth or title.
You know, in his later writings, Marcus often thought about his own death. He saw it as a natural dissolution of elements, like a trunk just being knocked into pieces. But he also faced the ultimate question head-on. Is the world governed by gods or atoms? By some divine providence, or just by mere confusion?
He admitted he didn't know for sure, but his conclusion is maybe his most powerful takeaway for us today. He says, if it turns out there is no governor, if it's all just a mere casual confusion void of all order, then we have reason to congratulate ourselves that in such a general flood of confusion, thou thyself hast obtained a reasonable faculty whereby thou mayest govern thine own life.
And that radical self-reliance, that's the anchor of his whole way of thinking. It raises a pretty important question for you, for the listener, based on his ultimate focus on what's internal. If you, like Marcus, could only truly trust your own rational faculty, how would you define the absolute minimum needed to live a truly happy and sovereign life? What are the very few wants that actually constitute happiness for you?